It's Thursday night, sometime between 1999 and 2002. You're watching Cartoon Network, probably later than you should be. The familiar banjo theme plays, and you settle in expecting the usual. Courage screams. Something weird happens in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. Everything turns out okay. Then the episode starts. And within 60 seconds, you realize something is different. This isn't funny scary. This isn't cartoon scary. This is wrong. Maybe it was King Ramses' curse, with that unsettling CGI pharaoh and his stone-flat voice demanding his slab be returned. Maybe it was Freaky Fred, with that man who smiled too wide and whispered, "Naughty," in a voice that felt like it was inside your head. Or maybe it was the House of Discontent, with that haunting violin and the demon who just wanted someone to understand her music. Whatever episode broke you, here's what's strange. You're not alone. An entire generation of kids watched Courage the Cowardly Dog and came away with the same inexplicable feeling that a cartoon about a pink dog had somehow reached through the screen and touched something real. Something we weren't supposed to feel yet. What you experienced wasn't an accident. It was a masterclass in childhood horror. And understanding why it affected you so deeply might reveal something uncomfortable about how we processed fear as kids and what we're still afraid of now. First, let's acknowledge what made Courage different from every other kids' show at the time. Most cartoons in the late 90s and early 2000s followed a formula. Bright colors, clear moral lessons, villains you could laugh at. They existed in a universe with rules where danger was temporary and adults were in control. Courage threw that formula in the trash. The show took place in the literal middle of nowhere, a farmhouse surrounded by endless desert, miles from help, where the elderly couple, Muriel and Eustace, lived in dangerous isolation. Every episode, something nightmarish would arrive at their doorstep, and every episode only a terrified dog stood between them and oblivion. But here's what made it truly disturbing. The show understood something about fear that most children, content, refuses to acknowledge. Real fear isn't about monsters under the bed. Real fear is about powerlessness. About being small in a world that doesn't care if you're small. About adults who can't or won't protect you because they don't even see the danger. Psychologists call this existential dread, the anxiety that comes from recognizing how fragile safety really is. And Courage served it to you in 11-minute doses, right before bedtime. The show weaponized something called uncanny valley horror, the discomfort we feel when something is almost familiar but fundamentally wrong. That CGI King Ramses wasn't just creepy because of how he looked. He was creepy because he moved differently than everything else in the show. He existed in a different reality. Your child brain couldn't process why he felt so alien, but it knew something was off. That cognitive dissonance triggered a primal fear response. This thing doesn't follow the rules, which means you can't predict it, which means you can't escape it. Think about Freaky Fred. His animation was normal. His voice was soft, almost gentle. But his smile never moved. His words were too deliberate. And that little whispered "naughty" after every rhyme turned a simple haircut into psychological torture. You couldn't explain why it terrified you because the threat wasn't physical. It was about violation, about someone enjoying having power over you, about politeness as a weapon. And here's where it gets deeper. Courage wasn't actually about the monsters. Every episode followed the same structure. Something arrives. Muriel is oblivious or kind to a fault. Eustace is cruel or dismissive. And Courage, already anxious, already terrified of everything, has to save them anyway. The show was about a small, scared creature forced to be brave in a world that offered no help. Does that remind you of anything? Like maybe being a kid? Because that's what you were processing when you watched Courage, even if you didn't have the words for it yet. You were learning that adults don't always see danger. That sometimes you have to face scary things alone. That being afraid doesn't excuse you from having to act. The show validated something you already sensed but hadn't articulated. The world is bigger and stranger than the adults in your life were admitting, and their protection has limits. Researchers have found that children between ages 7 and 12 are in what they call the concrete operational stage, old enough to understand permanence and consequence, but not yet equipped to process abstract existential threats. You could grasp that death was real, that bad things happen to good people, that safety is conditional. But you couldn't yet rationalize those fears or put them in philosophical context. So when Courage showed you a dimension where those fears were literal, Where monsters represented real anxieties about abandonment and powerlessness and mortality, your brain absorbed it at full intensity. The show's animation style made it worse. Those crude, exaggerated character designs suddenly shifting into realistic, detailed horror. Your brain had to keep recalibrating what was safe and what wasn't. One moment, you're watching a goofy pink dog. The next, you're staring at photorealistic eyes or rotting textures or body horror that belonged in an adult nightmare. The tonal whiplash meant you could never relax. Never trust the show to stay in its lane. And here's the part that's going to sting a little. You probably needed it. Not the trauma, let's be clear about that. But the acknowledgement. The permission to feel that things were scary without being told you were being dramatic. Most kids' shows of that era told you the world was fundamentally safe, that problems could be solved in 22 minutes. That good always triumphs clearly and completely. Courage told you the truth. The world is weird and sometimes hostile. Bravery doesn't mean not being afraid. And sometimes you save the day, but still have nightmares about it. That's why certain episodes stay with you decades later. They weren't just scary, they were honest. They treated your intelligence with respect, even while terrifying you. The show trusted that you could handle ambiguity, that you could sit with discomfort, that fear could coexist with love and humor and courage. So should you go back and watch those episodes now? Maybe. But here's what you'll discover. They're still unsettling, but they're also smaller than you remember. The episodes are only 11 minutes long. The animation is limited. The monsters that felt infinite in your childhood are contained in a frame. What made them feel huge was you. Your brain at that age, processing threats with maximum intensity because you were still learning what to be afraid of. Your isolation watching alone at night, in a house that suddenly felt bigger and emptier. Your lack of context for why these images disturbed you so much. The show didn't put the fear in you. It just gave shape to fears that were already there. Fears about vulnerability, about the adults in your life being fallible, about bad things happening for no reason. Courage was a mirror held up to anxieties you didn't yet have language for. And maybe that's the gift, looking back. Those episodes taught you that fear doesn't disqualify you from bravery, that being small doesn't mean being powerless. That even when you're shaking, even when you want to hide, you can still act. You can still protect what matters. That kid who watched Courage with their heart racing and their hands gripping the blanket, they learned something about themselves in those moments. They learned they could handle being scared. They learned that cartoons could be art, could be honest, could respect them enough to show them something real even if it was uncomfortable. You can't unwatch those episodes. The images are burned in. King Ramses will always hover in your memory. Freaky Fred will always whisper naughty. The violin from that demon song will always make you uneasy. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe those scares taught you that you're more resilient than you thought. That fear is survivable. That the scared dog always finds courage, not because the fear goes away, but because love matters more. You survived those episodes, and you survived everything that came after. The stuff Courage was really preparing you for. The real monsters that don't have convenient defeats or happy endings. The dog was always you, scared but still showing up. Still protecting what matters. Still brave, even when brave feels impossible. That's what felt too real. Because it was.